down.
Yeah.
That's the
Grab your favorite drink, pull up a chair, and welcome to the director's desk where we have real conversations over coffee or whatever's in your cup. Today we're talking about something every leader wrestles with, whether they realize it or not, culture. I'm joined today with my special guest, Senghor Mans. Senghor, is that how you pronounce it?
That is
Okay,
correct.
Senghor Mans, the president and CEO of Lucas Metropolitan Housing Agency in Ohio. Senghor was a guest speaker in my leadership class, and his presentation was one that hit home for a lot of us. Together, we're going to explore what culture really looks like inside an organization, why it matters more than you think it might, and how leaders can protect it. So, welcome, Senghor. I'm so glad that you're here.
Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to the conversation.
Yes, yes. So, before we dive into culture, tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how long you've been in housing.
Sure, sure. So I've been in housing 21 years. I started actually as general counsel and matured through the process to become the CEO now of Lucas Metropolitan Housing. So yeah, I'm a licensed attorney. Started practicing law in, not to date myself, but in 1995. I believe that's when it was. Yeah. So a licensed attorney for over 30 years, and then I've been in housing for about 21 years.
Licensed attorney, I bet that comes in handy sometimes when you have some questions. Can I do this or not do this? What's lawful?
Yeah, I think it certainly helped my trajectory for sure.
Yeah,
For sure.
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what drew you to the role in leadership, the president and CEO at your housing authority?
I've been very fortunate to have a lot of people before me and folks that have mentored me and folks that have helped guide and encourage me. For folks to say that they made it to wherever they made it by themselves are probably not being completely honest, right, with themselves or with others. Usually it's folks that have seen something in you and they ultimately give you opportunities. It's obviously up to you to seize the moment and seize the opportunities, but that's kind of the way it was with me. So when I became general counsel, I became general counsel. I was an attorney. I was fully trained in that background, but uh, the chief operating officer a few years later was available, um, and I wasn't a chief operating officer until ultimately that position was not filled, and I was actually going to go back into private practice, and
Yeah.
and the executive director asked me why I didn't put my name in the hat for that position, and so I said I was going back into private practice. So he encouraged me, and this is to my ultimate point about usually there are people along your way that help
Yeah.
you. So he encouraged me to you know step into this leadership role,
Yeah.
and I did. Really enjoyed it. Uh, Built muscles that I didn't know that I had,
Right.
and
Yeah.
um, and then
Yeah.
ultimately took on the CEO position at another housing authority when I decided to continue to ascend. And so it was a maturation, kind of an organic maturation process.
Yeah, for sure. When I first stepped into my role, I thought culture meant morale or people getting along. I didn't realize how much deeper it actually runs. In the leadership class that I referred to, we talked a lot about culture, and one of the things that really stood out to me was the connection between culture and employee well being.
Sure.
So let me start with this. When you hear the word culture in a housing authority, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, it's a little tough to wrap your mind around. I think you know when you see it. Um, it's not hard to see certain things and to observe things that you like and you don't like. That's not hard, I think. But in terms of trying to define it so that you can plan and build for what you want, I think that can be a little bit challenging. So the term culture is a popular term. It's, a lot of organizations use that term. We want the right culture. We want to build the right culture.
Right.
Our culture is toxic or whatever you want to say.
Right.
But I think about culture in terms of just um, quality and tone of the workplace, right? What's the quality of your workplace? What's the tone of the interaction between employees and employees with uh, the public and employees with residents? Because that tone, that give and take, quality and tone of interaction, really I think is the underpinning of the culture of the organization. If there's a sense of respect and decency and kindness and fairness, then that creates the kind of culture that where I think people are comfortable, because they spend the majority of their day in that environment. And so
Right.
I,
Yeah.
I presume that's what people want. They want to be around people that treat them with kindness and decency and an element of respect, or to a large degree of respect. So it's the interaction, the
I
interaction.
think
And so yeah.
culture is like
Yeah.
the umbrella, and then there's like all those little pieces underneath, like respect and communication and all those little things that make up the culture. And I don't think people kind of realize that there's so many aspects. Like culture is just the big word, and there's so many like different aspects to it.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a big word. You know it when you see it, but what it means in terms of what you're trying to accomplish to have a healthy culture versus, again, the term toxic culture. Um, how do you create that? I think it starts with how employees interact with each other.
Yeah. How does employees' well-being impact workplace culture?
Yeah, great question. These are tough questions. Um, I think.
They're not.
No, they are. They're really good questions, and I don't know if leaders just generally sit down and think about these types of questions when it comes to culture. But um, the reality is, it's not. It would be naive for me to think that staff, and maybe even myself, but staff, uh, they divorce their personal challenges that they have in their personal lives,
Yeah.
once they step in the door, like that show Severance. I've only seen a couple, one season or two, but that show Severance, where you have your outside life, but then you come into your workplace and you have a whole
Yeah.
totally different life, so to speak. It doesn't happen like that, and so
The old
so I
saying,
think as
leave it
leaders,
at the door.
yeah,
Leave it.
I think it's just naive to think that that's going to be the case, right? We
Yeah.
have our things that we're dealing with during the course of our lives, and that stress and those challenges and the pressure that might put on us doesn't stop just because you walk in the door and you turn your computer on. You still have those
Right.
things that are on top of mind. You have your cell phone with you that might be chiming with that particular issue or whatever the flavor is that you're dealing with.
Right.
But I think the for the leaders, to your question about the impact of well-being in the workplace, I think we have to just pay attention, right? I think that we have to, um, as best we can, identify when we can that employee that might need that that um, that that ear, right? I was going to say shoulder to lean on, but
Right.
just that ear, somebody to talk to,
Right.
somebody,
Yeah.
hey, look, it could be something as simple as how are you doing today? You doing okay?
Sure.
Do
Sure.
you need anything? You seem a little down, right? Are you okay? Right?
Yeah.
Just something as simple as that. My
That
door's
can go a
always
long
open if you
way.
want somebody to talk to. Yeah, exactly. So we can't walk around with blinders on and think that everybody comes in okay. We have to really, I think we just need to, without being too intrusive, just
Right.
offer an opportunity to um, have an employee talk to you or talk to somebody, or because it is important. That well-being. I can't be my best person. It's probably naive again for me to think that I'm going to be my best person when I come in and work. If I have a lot of other distractions outside that are really creating some challenges for me, it's hard for me to be my best self at work when I have those things. But if I have people that understand and are willing to understand and are not willing to judge,
Right.
or don't want or won't judge, then it becomes a little bit easier for me to wrestle with my day, I think, and become at least,
I
if
had
not
a
optimal. Yeah. Go ahead.
I had a gal in my class. She and I were talking about that, and she and I were complete opposites in that situation. The how you doing today and how's it going, and she's like, I need to be more like at the water cooler every once in a while or checking in because I just don't. And I'm just like, she has a bunch of employees and stuff, and I'm like up in everybody's business every day. How you doing? What's going on? Or something happened the day before, and I'm like checking in. How's your kid? How's your mom? And they're like,
Yeah.
oh God, But it was kind of funny how she was like, I need to be more like that, and I'm like, I probably need to take a piece of your the way you
Yeah.
handle things too. Yeah.
I think I need to be more like that as well. I don't think that I don't think that I do it nearly as much as I probably should. Um,
And
you
sometimes
know, it,
just recognizing that, like, okay, I need to be a
yeah,
little more, you know, at the water cooler, like she said,
it,
than I am.
exactly.
Sometimes just even recognizing that you need to elevate yourself a little bit is
That's
half of the
right.
process. Yeah.
And then in the larger the organization, the more challenging it is. If you said she had a lot of staff, but
Yeah.
it is still something that you need to at least attempt. You're not gonna be able to touch everybody all the time,
Sure.
right? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So that leads me into something else that it's been a lot learning curve for me. Even is the generational. I need a mental health day. I grew up professionally working under Gen X's and Boomers, and my career is rooted in you walk it off or rub some dirt on it and move on. So honestly, the mental health conversations weren't something we talked about. And actually, I didn't realize until I was like in my 40s that I probably have a little ADHD, or in the DISC assessment, I'm really 99% I. And my daughter looked at me, and I just thought I was a multitasker. And my daughter looked at me, and she's like, "Wow, you kind of have ADHD." And I'm like, "No, I don't. I'm just really good at a lot of things And I'm
right,
like,
right.
"That's my life." But the more I look into it, more I'm like, yeah, maybe I do have a little ADHD, but that was never anything we talked about. So it's
Right,
not a crutch. It means
right,
that my
right.
brain is moving a million different things at once, and it's like that saying, 20 tabs open on your computer, and somewhere there's music playing. That'd be me. So,
Yeah,
how do new leaders shift their mindset to recognize that mental health is a real thing, and we need to be, you know, we need to be able to juggle that with our leadership?
yeah. No, so you touched on, probably sort of the camp that I also uh, grew up in. I guess I think that I have adapted and adjusted and over time modified the way that I handle things. I'm not the same leader. Not to say tell you what my age is, but I'll tell you my age. So
Yeah.
I am not. I am not. I first took on the CEO role when I was 40, 41. The CEO role. I was in other roles, obviously a COO and or general counsel, but the CEO role I took on when I was 40, and now I'm 57.
Yeah.
Um, I am not the same leader that I was when I was 40, taking on that role as a 40-year-old. So I've matured. I've learned. They call it wisdom, I suppose, on a level.
Yeah. Yeah.
You learn certain things. You learn a lot over a period, and you start to understand how to better, I think, impact employees positively. And one of the skills that I don't think that I had the best, even though I was an attorney, my
Yeah.
my skill was really more so trying to be persuasive, obviously. Like, you have to speak, you have to analyze, you have to be able to take a lot of information, process it, and ultimately use that information for your purposes as an attorney. But it doesn't mean necessarily I'm a good, skilled listener. And
Yeah.
and over time, I think that's the muscle that I've really been trying to build very intentionally and continue to build, being a skilled listener. And so I think in the mental health space, getting to your question, I think that's where leaders can be very helpful in the mental health space. We're not professionals, right, in that area, and even though I minored in psychology, I don't feel like I know enough to really understand the signs and the signals and how to then respond to them. But I think that being a good listener and then trying to be responsive based on what you've heard, is a way to kind of address those issues. I'll say within myself and maybe other leaders is that one of the things that we have a tendency to do, or at least some have a tendency to do, is once you become a leader, once you get a certain title, you then sometimes don't hear others because your stuff you think is the stuff, right? Everything. I have a lot to say because I'm a leader, so therefore you got to hear me. And no, it doesn't.
Right.
You really have to listen to others and be strong in that
Right.
regard. And so, as much as I'm talking now, I really like to listen more. But I think that's really the muscle for in the space of mental health and your staff, and trying to understand that is a real issue.
Right.
It starts with listening to folks, understanding folks, and if you start to do that without being a professional in this space, you don't even have to call it mental health, but you'll just see that there are personality differences that then you can help manage a little bit better because of your purposeful listening.
As a leader, you don't have to diagnose their
No,
mental health.
exactly.
You just,
Right.
listen, and then they're going to tell you things like, I can only handle X amount of hours. Like, I'll put in 3 12-hour days, but then I got to have, this time or whatever. Like, they're going to
You got
kind
it.
of tell you what you need. So listening is just all you need, and then
Ex-
absorb.
exactly.
Yeah.
Purposeful listening.
Right. But there's another side of that conversation. It's not the Gen Z employees who need self care. Leaders need it too. And I actually have employees who say to me, "Did you have lunch today?" Or "You need to go home. Don't stay here so late." And they're just watching out for me. But a lot of time, I put my team first, and I feel like it's my job to skip taking care of myself in order to take care of them.
Sure.
So, as the boss or the CEO role, how do we protect our own self care while still caring for responsibility of a whole organization?
Yeah. Yeah. Some folks are better than others. Some leaders are better than others for sure. Um, you know, None of us we're no good to anybody, not to ourselves, not to our families, not to our friends, if we end up burning ourselves out, right? And that's kind of
Yeah.
what we're talking about when we talk about self-care in the context of just taking on that overwhelming amount of pressure, that you're not necessarily taking care of yourself. You run the risk of burning yourself out. And so I try as best I can. I've got guideposts, that just mental guideposts for myself to try to keep my balance. One of them is just remembering why I'm doing what I'm doing, right? Why
Right.
I'm in this space right now, working
Yeah.
in this particular organization, working with the individuals that I'm working with, the families that we serve, the communities that we serve, the families that we take care of, not just the families that are our participants, but our own family.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What's our, as they say, what's your why? Well,
Right.
understand that, right? And keep that in back of
Yeah.
mind. But I also, I try to control what I can control, right? And I don't I try not to get, it's easier said than done, try not to get mired down in, dwelling on things I can't control, because that
That's hard.
creates,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, that creates some stress. So I try to control what I control. And then if I'm operating with integrity all the time, just as a guidepost, then even if things are kind of going in a different direction, not the way that I want it to necessarily, or maybe you're getting resistance or whatever the case might be, at least you know you're coming from a good purpose, right? You're coming with good intention, you're coming with integrity. And so I can sleep well at night. I can
There
sleep
you go.
well at night,
Yeah.
knowing that I'm operating with integrity. And then, as best you can, and this is kind of what your staff um, are suggesting, gi-
Yeah.
give yourself some time. Give yourself some time to do other things, right?
Right.
Try,
Yeah.
try to find some other things that'll kind of take your mind away from, this work, and
Yeah.
get your balance back, right? And so that's what I try to do. Now I'm not perfect at it, but I try.
Right. Right. We all try. Yeah. Kind of like the on an airplane. You put your own oxygen mask on before you
On
help
first,
others. And yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. And it's like, well, I mean, that makes sense. Like, if I can't breathe, I can't help somebody else breathe.
That's
But
right.
the mom or the dad instinct is to help that your kid put theirs on first because they're priority. But if you don't take care of yourself, you can't help take care of others. So, yeah.
Perfectly stated. That's right. That's right.
Now let's talk about something that showed up loud and clear for me, the employee culture survey. We did this exercise in class, and let me tell you, it hit me like a truck. The word kept coming up over and over again, communication. That was a big eye opener for me. So I implemented something with my team called What's Up Wednesdays. We do a
Mm,
fun communication activity and we just reconnect as a team. I know that some places they're just a one man show, so they don't have that. Or places have, 180 employees, so it can get a little difficult. But just this past week, I used the time to recognize our maintenance staff who've been working hard for our upcoming inspection. So, and we did a fun TikTok as a group, and some of them were regretting it. They were like, "No, absolutely not." But it was a good time. So, what strategies have you seen work when it comes to improving your maintenance or not maintenance? I'm sorry, improving or maintaining a positive work culture. So, what strategies have you put in place?
yeah. So things that you try, and I don't know if they
Yeah.
materialize into what you want them to materialize into,
True.
but things that
Yeah.
you can try. And surveys, I suppose, could let you know ultimately if they work out. I'm a big person on um, getting to know me and getting to know staff in other contexts. Like, I'm wearing a suit and tie, but when I get home, I'm putting sweatpants on, right?
Right.
I'm
Right.
not.
Yeah.
This is not the sum total of me and my personality,
Yeah.
um, by no means. And so, so one of the things that I like to do is I like to break bread with folks. It's a good way everybody eats, and
Hmm.
generally, if you're with somebody else while you're eating, you talk,
Sure.
and you're not necessarily talking about work. And so one of the things that I try to do is once a month. We do have 180 employees. What I try to do once a month is just have a lunch, just with whoever wants to attend. I don't. It's
Yeah.
not mandatory. It's voluntary. There can be 2 people there, or there can be 25 people, and we've had both. Um,
Yeah.
and we just eat and we talk, and there's no particular agenda unless there's something that I want to make sure that's expressed, but no particular agenda, just an opportunity to talk and check in, and how are you doing, how's your family, what's
Sure.
going on this weekend, that kind of stuff. And so once a month I try to have lunch, and I encourage, of course, our senior staff to join, so that any of the line staffers can also have an opportunity to see them in a different environment as well. But I also we have, not I, but we have employee of the month. Just kind of it sounds like similar to what you all do with What's Up Wednesdays. We have an employee
Yeah.
of the month, where we actually ask our senior staffers to nominate somebody that's done something that's, really noteworthy, or something that's exceptional, something that, we really want to encourage others to emulate, or be like. And so we'll take those nominations, and we have a little scoring group, a little scoring committee, and then if that individual wins, then they end up getting highlighted and promoted, and we
Yeah,
do some
cool.
social media
Recognize.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
yeah,
get some, little gifts and all of that, and
cool.
hopefully it increases the morale. Hopefully it helps people feel good about being recognized, acknowledged, and that others feel like now they can be acknowledged as well because of this kind of program. But so we do that, and then I try to, with every new person, every new employee in particular. So I've only been in this organization, the current one, for a year and a half, even though I was with my prior organization for almost 15 years as their CEO. I try to meet with every new employee and talk about, before they even start, talk about expectations, talk about what it means to be a special employee. I call it Gold Star employee. I don't call it special
Yeah,
employee, but it's the same thing.
yeah,
What it means to be an exceptional employee, in my estimation. And so I have those conversations up front so that they kind of understand, hey, these are not like, grand arm twisting kinds of endeavors.
yeah.
You can be an exceptional employee if you do certain things. And so we have those kind of conversations, right? Yeah.
I like that. Was a I worked at a restaurant. I worked in the bar. I was a bartender, and it was my pay for dance job because my girls were in competitive dance, and that gets pricey. So it was my pay for dance job, and there were a couple of guys that would come in every week for a couple hours, and they'd sit and just drink some beers and whatever. And they were all from the bank. Of course, I live in a very small town, so. And I'm, you just get to talking. Nobody's there except those guys. So I'm standing there chatting with them, and I'm like, "What do you guys do? Like, why are you guys always here? What do you're just evading work, or like, what are you doing?"
Right.
And they just said, we do this once a week, and it's just we get the heck out of the office, and we come and we chat, and you don't try to hear, but and they didn't talk about work. For the most part, they talked about their wives, and they talked about they did these crazy things when they were younger or whatever. And
Right.
it was just them getting together outside of work. And I always loved that. I just thought that was super cool.
Yeah, very,
And one
very
more
similar
thing
kind
there.
of concept.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
and the break bread, that's perfect. Yeah. I love that. We hear lack of communication, but what does that even mean? Is it tone, frequency, clarity, or just people aren't actually understanding each other? Because at the end of the day, communication isn't one size fits all. And figuring out how other people's communicate is a whole game. It's a whole thing. So how have you figured out what your team, how they communicate?
Yeah, I don't know if I've quite figured it out yet. I think so. So being here a little over a year and a half, I certainly made my assessments about certain things, including the environment, including the workplace, and some of the challenges that this particular institution or organization may have, and some of them are no different than other institutions or organizations, for sure. The common thread with all of us is that we're run by people, and those people, we're not AI, we're not computers.
Right.
We have personalities, right?
Of course.
And
Yeah.
and some personalities don't mesh as well with others. Some people they've become very successful because of the type of approach that they've taken, which may not be the same approach that somebody else who's very successful has taken, but they've done their thing and it's worked for them. Somebody else has done their thing and it's worked for them, but it might not
Right.
necessarily match well when they're dealing with each other, so to speak. And so what I've tried to do is I've tried to take some of me, my personality, and kind of my approach to things, and what I believe are the proper ways in which to interact with each other, and set those as guides, right? Like I'm not a yeller, right?
Right.
You'll rarely hear me in any meeting. Not that I'm a saint or anything, but you'll probably never hear me in a meeting use any type of profanity, any type of curse
Yeah.
word, right? And what I'm doing is I'm setting those expectations. This is how we engage with each other. This is how we manage our feelings and our emotions and um, our when we're dealing with difficult situations. We don't have a tantrum, right?
Right.
We try to deal with issues professionally and decent and with decency, and because that common expectation, I think, begins to become comfortable with folks, that you can still get to a point of reason and hopefully consensus through very respectful ways. That communication becomes easier, I think.
Yeah.
And people aren't talking over each other and trying to one up each other and those kind of things. And so and then the other is, I think, in terms of communication, there are plenty of times where I know I've talked about a particular issue, but to hear somebody else, they would say they were not aware of the issue. And so
Yes.
sometimes it's the quality of the communication. It's just the quality of the communication, right? It's,
Right.
sometimes I'll hit it very quickly and keep moving, right? Like I said this and I kept moving and I didn't spend enough time really articulating what
Right.
I needed in the moment. And then obviously being accessible, like if communication is a two-way street, so that means you have to make yourself also, we call it the open door policy, right? You
Right.
have to make yourself accessible to folks so that when they're ready to talk to you about something that they have going on, or that where they need your guidance or your input or your approval, your authorization, whatever it is, you're making yourself accessible as much as you possibly can, and as opposed to I gotta catch him in this brief window of time because he's never around, he's never available, she's never around, she's never available.
Right.
That hurts the communication flow for sure.
Agreed. Have you done anything like personality or communication assessments, like the DISC assessment, or anything like that with your staff or new employees to understand how they
Yeah.
operate?
Yeah, it's kind of the new, I don't even know if it's the new thing, but it's the newish thing for me, right?
For
So
me too. Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we, prior to me coming here to my current position, um, there were some evaluations that were done. They were I forget exactly what it's called, but it's the leadership circle or circle of leadership index or something like that. Um, so they were already going down that path and doing something like that.
Yeah.
I kind of shifted gears, um, and thought I liked the thinking, at least in what I'm hearing for my leaders, in terms of understanding a little bit better, because I was kind of new, understanding them a little bit better, since I'm really getting a fire hose of information, and not just information about the organization, but the personalities and all that.
Oh yeah.
And so we did what's referred to as a predictive indexing exercise, and so you get a series of questions, tons of questions. You answer those questions. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? What about this? What about that? Da, da, da. And then they'll tell you where you fit, and they'll give you they'll assign a name, like Maverick or Operator or Scholar,
Yeah.
or and and so we did that, and so all of our senior leaders went through that exercise, and I got to actually get that feedback and understand them a little bit better, so that I kind of once I started seeing kind of signs of those things, then I could draw back to what we were the predictive indexing exercise. So I was actually so there were about 21 of us that did it, and so there are like 4 quadrants, and the different quadrants are essentially wherever your strength is, you end up becoming designated a particular whatever, Operator, Maverick, Scholar, whatever it might be, and you'll be in one of those quadrants. And so we had, you know, people in all these different quadrants, these four different quadrants. And there was one that was like literally, because they had these, all the dots with all the names.
Yeah.
And then there was one that was exactly in the middle by
Oh,
their
bullseye.
index, smack dab, right at the
Oh my
the,
gosh.
the X, right, or not the X, but the cross, right?
Yeah,
And guess who that one person, without the 21 people, the one person that was right there in the middle of all four of those quadrants
that was
was me.
you.
Exactly. Bizarre, bizarre.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
yeah, yeah, very curious.
I
So
think it's
yes, to
funny.
answer your question, yeah.
I think it's funny because, it's like, I'm saying it's like new to me, but my generation, the magazine girl, the cosmopolitan girl of me,
Right.
we've been taking these tests for our whole lives. Like, but they were just, like, what kind of relationship are you, should you be
Right,
in?
that's
Whatever.
right.
But it's like a different version of it. But we've been practicing these DISC assessments or these personality assessments our whole life. So, yeah.
Your whole life, your entire life, that's
Yeah, for
right.
sure.
You just never
Um,
assigned a particular name to it, right, or designation.
You're right. Yeah, it was just a different. Yeah. I had a friend send me a TikTok recently that really struck me as a leader. It talked about the difference between doing the bare minimum versus going the extra mile. And here's the example: the boss asked an employee to get a document from another company. In one scenario, the employee sent one email and then stopped there. And the boss has to keep asking, did you follow up? Did you call? Did you try again? Can you do this? And then eventually the boss was just like, okay, forget it. Let me
I'll
take
do
it
it.
over. In the second scenario, the employee, same thing. The employee sends an email, then they follow up, then they call, then they ask questions, they keep trying, and eventually they get the document. It was a very important document. And the boss was incredibly grateful because they didn't have to manage every step. So the point is, going the extra mile doesn't always mean staying late or getting paid more or anything like that. Sometimes it means just taking ownership in solving a problem. And
That's
I'm
right.
honestly not sure that's something you can fully teach. It's something that people just kind of evolve over time, or they understand what your expectations are, and then they just get there. Um,
Yeah.
so, if as leaders we aren't always clearly communicating the goals or the expectations, we're not setting people up for success. So, how do you recognize the team members who naturally go the extra mile?
Yeah. So, um, really, really good question. That I'm not sure I'm great at it. I think that I'm intentional in um, trying to be encouraging. I can give you a good example. Well, let me first, before I give my examples, because we'll be on this. If you already know, I will talk until you tell me to stop. So, so to the question itself, I believe that part of the folks that go the extra mile sometimes are not the ones. Usually, I find are not the ones that uh, will tell you they went the extra mile. Like that's just they're just built like that, right?
Yeah, that's yeah.
They've kind of created this way in which they conduct themselves, do their business, because that's now who they are, or that's who they are just generally, right?
Right.
Either they've learned it, or it's just who they are, and they'll go that extra mile because that's just what they do.
Yeah.
Um, and it's not for glorification most of the time. In my opinion, it's not for glorification. It's just how they do things.
Right. Yeah.
But they also though run the risk, unfortunately, of being taken for granted, right? Like you don't. Oh well, that's just Jim doing Jim, right? And
Right.
you don't end up stopping and saying, hey, thank you for going the
Right.
extra mile. I really appreciate you taking time to go and get this taken care of for me the way that you did in the manner that you did. Thank you very much. And we don't do that enough as I think leaders, is to say thank you and acknowledge and recognize when you have those folks that are doing exceptional work for us, that had not been a part of really what you asked them to do, other than
And
to,
sometimes that guy Jim, he's just gonna be like, "Well, that's my job." If you're
that's what I
like, "Oh,
do.
I'm
Yeah, that's
so,
exactly what Jim's gonna say. You know,
yeah, yeah,
man, that's what you pay me to do, right? Like, no big
that's what
deal.
you want me to do."
But,
Yeah,
but in the back, I think in the back though, in the back, Jim or Jane, they are also observing others not working at the pace and at the level that they are. That they're not
yeah,
doing that kind of thing, even though they think that everybody should be doing it. And so it becomes a little bit of a morale issue. Like, I'm doing all of
right,
this and they're not doing this and nobody's acknowledging. I'm just going to keep doing it because that's what I do. But boy, it's nice if somebody actually sees that I am cut a little differently, that I'm cut from a different
right.
cloth. And that's, so I think it's important to acknowledge that the leaders not just say, well, that's just what Jim or Jane does, but instead stops. And so the example that um, I would give, I have a staffer who um, wrote this really, really detailed, long, heartfelt, kind of personal treatise almost. It's not that long, but almost like a semi-treatise on her department programs, things that she feels are really important for people to understand about the various programs within her department and how things
Yeah,
are laid out and this continuum of the work that they do. And I didn't ask her to do it. She
yeah,
did it. It was very, very thoughtful, very, very well put together. And so I read it and I told her, I said, well, that's a big document. I need to understand who your audience is, because if it's for residents in a newsletter, I don't think that's going to be read. It's a little too long for that.
right.
But here's what I said though. I said I am very, very impressed with what you did.
Yeah,
I really believe that what I think you should be doing, because it was so personal, and I think she really did want some affirmation from the hard work that she put together, is I want us to work on you publishing this. That's how long it was.
yeah,
Let's make you an author. Let's actually
right.
put this together, format it as a little mini book, so to speak, with chapters, and give you that acknowledgement that you deserve for taking the time to be so thoughtful. And again, it was coming from a very personal place when she wrote it,
Yeah,
and that was my way of saying, you know what, this is what you get when you work this hard and do this exceptional work.
right.
You know what? You should be a published author, right?
Yeah,
And you can
yeah,
say that now. Once it gets done, forevermore, you're a
right.
published
Yeah,
author. You know,
and what a
you
cool
can say, for
compliment.
example, Karma, you could say, I am a producer of
Yeah.
shows. This is a show. Yeah, exactly. You went that
Hell
extra mile. You went that
yeah,
extra mile. Talking about very important things, right? So,
yeah,
but I do think that there is this, and it's probably not new, so I'm not going to call it a phenomena of recent days. It's probably been going on since the time of employment, but
yeah.
there's a word attached to um, what I'm about to suggest is, there's this thing called quietly quitting, right? Like,
Mhm.
you know what, I'm going to do the bare minimum and I'm going to just work so that I don't get written up, I don't get fired, I don't get let go. I'm going to still get my check, but I'm not doing anything extra. I'm not.
Right.
I'm going to pass off all the work and have it assigned to somebody else, delegated to somebody else. I'm essentially quietly quitting until I ride into the sunset. And so, it's those examples of quietly quitting that I try to wrestle with. I try to identify, and then ultimately um, try to address in a very diplomatic way, because it can be a culture buster, right?
Mhm.
If everybody is kind of thinking, well, if that's what they're doing, well, then that's what's expected, so that's what I'm going to do as well. I'm just going to do the bare minimum, and
Right.
if that's good enough for everybody else, then I guess that's going to be good enough for me. I don't want that kind of attitude, and so the
Sure.
quietly quitting phenomena can be infectious if you don't start to acknowledge it, identify it, acknowledge it, and then address it.
Yeah. And employees don't sometimes realize I'm kind of having that sort of situation where that just bare minimum, skate by, don't get in trouble, don't cause any ripples, whatever. Um, but I'm sitting here watching, and I'm like, I'm waiting for them to take that step, or like just do this project, the book, or I'm waiting for that to happen, and they're just like even keel.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
that leads me to my that
Some
leads
of
me
it
to my
is.
next question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you make how do you set your expectations so that your team knows exactly what it looks like to go that extra mile, to reach that, to not be that quiet quitter? Like, how do you set those expectations?
Yeah, I don't think it's easy because you just gave kind of an example of somebody just getting by, and they're not going to do anything more than what's being asked of them, so to speak. But for me, it's sort of in the realm, if you want to call it that, of operating with integrity. Is you never ask somebody. I don't, at least, ask somebody to do something that I'm not willing to do. Right, and so
Right.
if
Yeah.
if I'm asking folks, or if there's an expectation of going the extra mile or putting in that extra bit of work because something needs to get done, I'm not asking anybody to do something that I'm not willing to do. If something requires that you have to stay, an extra hour, or 2 or 3, whatever it might be, or work on a weekend to get a particular project um, taken care of or addressed, whatever that looks like, or have to visit a particular office or partner, or and have that conversation, or do public, whatever it is, not ask somebody to do something, or employee to do something that you're not willing to do. Because
Right.
if there are things that you're asking your staff to do that you're not willing to do, then they're going to call you a hypocrite. And that's part of
Yeah.
the integrity piece of it, right?
Yeah. They're
And they're just
definitely
going to say,
calling you out.
why are you asking me to do this? I never see you work after hours. I never see you work on the weekends. I never see you go and
Right.
talk to the residents. I never see you um, uh, come in, only go to lunch for an hour. You always take 3 hours for lunch. You're always
Right.
in late. You always leave early. And so if you're going to
Yeah.
be a hypocrite, it's hard to set expectations. I think
That's
when you're operating with integrity and you're not being hypocritical, people will see how you work, the manner in which you work, kind of going back to even the culture that you want to create, the tone that you use, the way you interact with staff. It's your actions help set that expectation, right?
hmm
Um, I'm usually one of the first people that come into work. Not because I'm trying to say to everybody that you need to come in, early. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just saying if I ever ask somebody to come in early, I'm not asking them to do something that I haven't been doing, right?
Right.
And so that's how you kind of set the expectations. I think is by your
Yeah.
own your own actions that then hopefully at some point folks start to emulate, at least from time to time.
The lead by example sort of
Lead by example.
mentality.
Yep.
Yeah. None of us are perfect leaders. Let's be honest.
No,
We're all still
100%.
learning.
Yep.
Whether you've been doing this for 20 years or 3 years, we're still working.
That's right.
What's one area where it's culture or communication, where you still challenge yourself to improve?
Yeah. So, like I said, yeah, I'm not the leader that I was 17 years ago, for sure. I think that one of the areas, so back then, if you asked that question, I would say that I didn't delegate very well.
Yeah.
I tried to take everything on, and kind of going back to that self care, right? I tried to take
Yeah.
everything on,
Right.
and if you want to get it done right, you got to do it yourself mentality, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I
And
think a lot of us
you,
think that way.
yeah, yeah. But you have to at some point you have to kind of let go of the reins a little bit, and some of that comes with time, right?
Yeah.
Um, for me now, it's about uh, engagement, right? Like I have to be very mindful and very intentional that engagement with staff is important. It's important to them. It helps me, quite frankly, stay grounded in a manner. That my why, going back to my why, some of the things that we're
Sure.
doing. Well, one of the things that I am always trying to make sure that I'm thinking about is how do I make sure that my staff are comfortable, right? How do I make sure that next year they still have a job? How do I make sure that with all the
Right.
budget dynamics and all the different things that go on around us, that at least the folks that I'm working with will be secure in their positions so that they can continue to take care of themselves and their families and all of that. And so by staying engaged, it's a good reminder to me that, these are the people that I care about a lot of people, but these are people that I work around and I care for, and I want to make sure that they're doing okay. And so
Yeah.
so that engagement piece is important. And then so I have this um, maybe unreasonable sense of urgency. Like I want to get things done right now. Like we got to get,
Yeah.
and I gotta back off of that. I've learned how to say that not everybody's like me when it comes to that, right? Like you have
Yeah.
to give people a reasonable time frame to get things done. And so I'm learning that not everybody has my sense of urgency, my pace,
Right.
my rhythm, so to speak. And so I don't expect that from everybody now, but I used to all the time. And so um, and that was probably not a good leadership quality of mine.
That's kind of a, I don't know. Sometimes it can just be like an aha moment where, oh, they don't see it the way I see it, or they don't
Exactly.
move as fast as I move, or whatever. And you have to
Exactly.
step back and go, okay, take your blinders off and put your glasses on and go, okay, what am I looking at here? So,
That's absolutely right. That's
what's a
absolutely right.
communication blunder that still sticks with you over, but something you're like, man.
Yeah. Oof. So I don't know. I don't know if I told you this, or told the group this. I might have mentioned this, and I tell the story now. At first, when I used to tell the story, it was kind of embarrassing. Now I tell it because it is, I think, a learned lesson. But so when I
Yeah.
first took on the job as CEO in my previous employment, some 16 and a half years ago, 17 years ago, I met with my senior leadership team, and we had this little kind of retreat. It was just us, so it wasn't really a retreat, but it was off site. It wasn't in the office, and I was really trying to get to know them, and I really wanted them to get to know me, and I wanted them to understand where I was coming from, and
Yeah.
just how I see things. And so I said something very inartfully. This is the blunder. Very inartfully, that I didn't realize was received not the way that I intended, but was received differently. And here's what I said. I
Oh,
said, just so everybody understands. And so I'm standing up, everybody's sitting down. They got the round tables. Just so everybody understands. Right now, I don't trust any of you, right?
oh,
But you shouldn't trust me either, right? We're gonna grow that together as we, do what we're supposed to do. As I say what I'm gonna do, and then I do it, and you say what you're gonna do, and then you do it. Then we're gonna build trust together. So, about a year later, one of my senior staffers, and I can't remember how it comes up, but he said, "Super, remember back when we had that first, big thing with you, and you had said that you didn't trust any of us. That did not land well with
oh,
anybody." It's like, what are you
oh.
talking? It's like, what
What?
do you mean? And he said, when you said that you distrust us, and I was like, whoa, 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 that's not what I said. That's not what I
Right,
said. I said
right,
that we're starting at zero.
right,
There's no trust either way, distrust, trust either way, and that we will grow that trust together, right? And so I didn't say that I distrust anybody. He said, but that's how it was received.
oh,
That
Lordy.
you distrusted all of us, and we hadn't
Oops.
done anything to deserve that distrust. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's not what I. So everybody was carrying around with them for a year, this thinking, and I just said, you know what, I did not handle that well.
Yeah. You're like, okay, well, I gotta gather everybody back, and I gotta
I
redo
got
this.
it. Yeah, and at the senior staff meetings that we would have, I would just, talk about how, look, you all, I've seen you operate. You guys are wonderful. You have the right
Yeah.
mentality. I really know that I've got the best in the business. So I would do that thing to try to just erase that use your term, that blunder
Yeah.
that I made. So yeah. It still haunts me to this day.
Yeah.
And
Just telling it, you're like, oh God,
yeah,
no.
I know. Phew. And there are plenty of others I could probably talk about, but
Oh
we
yeah.
won't.
There was a moment during our leadership program where I was really struggling with a staff situation. I was frustrated. I was drained. And if I'm being honest, I was also avoiding what I knew deep down needed to happen. That was actually stemmed from the culture survey that we had to do in class. And I brought it to the class, to a small group, and one of my classmates just looked at me and said something I'll never forget. She just looked me straight in the eye and said, "You know what you need to do. It's right there in front of you. Your staff is telling you exactly what you need." And she was right. So why do leaders in those situations avoid what's something right in front of them? They see
Yeah.
it, or they miss what's so obvious to other people.
Yeah, no, fascinating question. Because it could be a number of, in my mind at least, a number of different reasons. One can be, that we know what the response has to be or what the answer has to be, and it might not be pleasant, right?
Yeah.
So you try to avoid the unpleasantry by avoiding the issue that's right in front of you.
Yeah.
Another could be, you know, sometimes we don't see things because we're focused on our own interests, and so we're not necessarily seeing that there are other things that are going on at play because we are laser focused on certain things that are our particular agenda on our particular agenda that need to get addressed, and so
Yeah.
we don't necessarily want to spend a whole lot of mental energy on other things. I say often, and I think others have said this, but it seems to hold true that 80% of our challenges are the result of 20% of our staff, right? Like only a small percentage actually create a lot of the drama, and
Yeah.
that amount of time being sucked up, if you can avoid it sometimes, you do. I'll get to it when I get to it as leaders,
Yeah.
and so I think there could be a number of different reasons, but one of them is potentially just avoidance, right? I'm just not ready to deal with this right now, and
Yeah.
I actually did have. I mean, coincidentally, I did have my HR director, as a matter of fact, with a particular situation that just really just hit me in the heart, right?
Yeah.
And so since it hit me in the heart, that means that this really stinks to have to deal with.
Yeah.
And she says, you know what you got to do, right? Said it just like that.
Yeah.
And I said, of course. I don't want to, but I get it.
I don't want
I
to.
know
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just
yeah,
don't want to. Yeah.
yeah. I just don't want to, and so yeah, the job's hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
But you know,
I heard somebody say something like, "Why do we let it go? Because we think it's gonna fix itself.
true.
You
Yeah,
know, you think that the kink in the hose is just gonna pop out, but
yeah,
it's not. You know,
yeah,
it's just not. And
yeah.
you
You
just
hope it's
like
going to
hope and
improve.
pray that that's gonna
Yeah,
just fix, but it
and
doesn't.
it doesn't. 9 times out of 10, it does not. Unfortunately. Yeah.
For me, the hardest part was I genuinely liked the person, like that I was struggling with, and
Yeah.
but I knew the team was struggling. So
Yeah.
that's one of those times where it's like you sacrifice one for the good of the whole group, right? It's you
That's
just
right.
I've heard
Yeah.
Cliff Martin say you got to cut out the cancer, but you got to do it before it becomes cancer. You got to do it before that,
Before it
and we're
spreads.
just
Yeah.
again, just sweep it under the rug. It's going to fix itself, and we just can't.
I agree
So I want
completely.
everyone, for me, I want everyone to like me. I want everyone to get along, but leadership doesn't work that way. So how do you separate liking someone as a person from recognizing that they're just not the fit for the team?
Yeah. Yeah, so kind of again going back to my guidepost. Um, I'm big on applying, and I think I had some discussion when I talked to your cohort. Is applying our standards fairly, right?
Yeah.
And so if you have standards, you have things that are very clear in terms of expectations, and any particular member of your team is not meeting those expectations, then how would you handle it if it was somebody that you didn't like? If you like that person and they're not meeting your expectations, how would you handle that scenario or that situation if it was somebody that you did not like?
Right.
And if you were to say, well, you know what, I would do this A, B, C, well, it has to be the same no matter who that person is, whether it's somebody that you like versus somebody that you don't like. They're not meeting expectations or they're not the right fit. How do you fairly apply your standards? And so I try to come at it like that, and in that way, again, you can sleep better at night knowing that you're doing it fairly. I often ask the question because I'm still fresh here, so to speak. For particular scenarios, how have we had this situation in the past before me, and how have we handled this scenario if it's similar in the past? Because I want to make sure we're being consistent. I want to make sure that we're applying our standards very similarly. And then you when you do it like that, then you don't get accused of preferential treatment and treating folks differently, or you're discriminating, or you've got your clique that's that kind of stuff. Nope, it's not what's happening here, right? So that's what I would offer.
What advice would you give to a new director who maybe hasn't managed a team before when it comes to culture?
I think that they first have to listen and understand what the culture is, right? Like don't go in and I call it kicking the door down, right? Don't go in kicking the door down and saying this is the way it's going to be. It's my way or no way, right? I don't think that's a good approach because you're going to get a lot of resistance probably on some level. I think you need to just, as you're listening and learning and observing and being attentive, try to understand if there's a camaraderie-based culture or a silo-based culture or a cliquey-based culture. And if it's a camaraderie-based culture, you probably have a relatively professional culture that people are comfortable with and they get along, and going back to this interaction of employees comment that I made earlier. If it's a silo-based culture, you might have more, it's not always the case, but you might have more of a high school level culture, right? And you don't want that. Yeah, you don't want that, and I don't think at least. And so you try to make those assessments, you try to make those evaluations. You obviously have to listen to folks and read between the lines at times, and then start working on some plans, if not formally, at least informally, on how to create a camaraderie-based culture.
Right. And so instead of stepping in brand new, or once you've stepped in, because I think that sometimes, and maybe my personality, but rocking the boat, I think, to show that that you can handle it, but rocking the boat to realign the culture, sometimes I think you could blow things up to make it work.
It can, yeah. I mean, I think you have to understand what you're dealing with first before you decide to blow anything up.
True.
If it needs to be, if you need to do that, and hopefully you don't. Hopefully you have enough professionals that can actually, you can lock arms with and be a part of that culture building process. But it's I think it serves your purpose better if you try to work with what you have and build on what you have, I think it's much harder to blow things up and try to start from scratch. It's
Yeah.
you're going to get some resistance, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So if you could go back to that one moment, what's the moment that you would do over? That one challenge that maybe you reacted and you should have handled a little differently.
So if I don't talk about my I don't trust anybody moment, which was confused with I distrust everybody moment, which I would have done
Yeah.
differently. I we all have, I think, our tendencies to be presumptuous, some more than others. As leaders, we presume certain things about, you know, who folks are without really knowing them, presuming intention and objectives and agendas without really knowing, and you start making decisions based on those presumptions, and so you need to get better at that. And so the example that I would give is, so I had one staffer, senior staffer, former employment, that I needed a report from this person, and he ended up ultimately giving me the report, and it was in writing. It was hard copy. And I said, hey, great. I was at my desk. He hands it to me, and I said, hey, I look up and I said, hey, I'm working on something. Can you just do me a favor? Can you just send it to me by email, and I'll take a look at it when I get an opportunity, and and then I can file it away in my electronic files. And so he goes back to his office, and I'm done with what I'm doing now. About an hour goes by, hour and a half goes by, and so I still don't have anything in my email. I'm ready to read it. I don't have anything in my emails. So I go into his office and I say, hey, I haven't received your report. Can you go ahead and send it to me? I can read it now. And he looks at me. He's sitting down. I'm standing up. He looks at me. He says, okay, I'll get it to you. So I go back to my office. I don't know, about another hour goes by, hour and a half, and I still haven't received it. And so now I'm mildly agitated, and I'm presuming that he's being defiant now. Saying,
Right.
I gave you my report, you didn't take it,
Right.
you're just gonna have
Okay.
to wait. Yeah, you're just gonna
Right.
have to wait now. All right. So again, I'm a relatively new leader, right? In this capacity in this organization as their CEO. So I go back into his office. And now I am a little agitated. It's probably come across in my voice, if I'm being honest. And I said, "What's going on? I'd asked you to send this report. You haven't sent it to me. Send it to me by email." And he's an older gentleman, and he turns around to me and he says, "Senghor, I know what you asked me to do. I don't know how to do that." And I felt like a heel at that point. Because my presumption was everybody knows how to send emails, attachments, via email attachments. And he didn't. He had never done it before.
Yeah.
He'd always done hard copy with folks. And so my presumption was that his agenda was to be defiant, but he was being difficult with me, when in fact,
Right.
actually, he was embarrassed to admit that he couldn't do something. He was probably waiting, he didn't say this, but he was probably waiting to have somebody else show him how to do it, so then he could send it to me, but there was nobody around to help him.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I was left feeling like a heel, like, I don't do that, Senghor. Don't presume that people are operating with, ill intent, that they're
Right.
trying to, make you look bad or trying to be defiant. Give them the benefit of the doubt, and then try to, work with them in whatever that issue is. And so I would have done that much differently
Yeah.
now if I had it to do it over again, for sure.
Yeah, I had that sort of situation but I just assumed everyone in the office knew how to use Microsoft Excel because I've used it and I've worked in an office my entire life, and so I know how to do formulas and all of that, and I just was like, you guys put your timesheet on a spreadsheet and just send it to me, or let's put it on the a shared drive and we can all have access to it and stuff. And they were like, um, how do we do that? And I'm just like, you know how to use Excel? So then I had to step back and be like, okay, you know, these people, one of them that I hired was a stay-at-home mom until I hired her. So, she didn't do that. So just assuming that people know what you know is kind
Right.
of just runs you over like a truck sometimes.
That's it's not a good approach. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I saw a quote recently that said, "Nothing will destroy a great team faster than tolerating a bad employee." And that hit home because when leaders tolerate that bad behavior, the rest of the team starts to feel like their effort doesn't matter. And that kind of goes back to, the going the extra mile and stuff and not recognizing those people. So what's one thing leaders tolerate that slowly erodes the culture?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be a number of things, but one is a double standard, right? You're
Yeah.
going back to kind of the fair application of standards. You hold certain people accountable for doing ABC, and you don't hold other people that are doing the same thing, ABC, accountable. So you're using
Yeah.
different standards for different people, and it's gonna be a morale buster, right? And it'll slowly create a culture of distrust. I'm gonna use that term now. Uh, I really mean it in this case, distrust.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I think it does. And then the other is where leaders allow for certain people to one of the terms that bothers me is when somebody says, hey, I'm just being direct, just being direct.
Yeah.
Right, and it bothers me only because then what people do is they think that it's licensed for them to be rude, right?
Right.
And so
Like,
I
no offense. No offense.
yeah, no
But
offense, but I'm about to offend you, right?
yeah.
Uh, and um, so if you let people, certain people, because that's just the way that I am. I'm just a very direct person, which is code for I'm just a very rude person.
Hmm.
If you allow that person to be that, be rude in your organization, in your workplace, um, a lot of folks will start to recoil. Um, a lot of employees will not engage. They will not want to be a part of. They won't want to be in the same room as that individual, or they
Right.
won't be. If they're in the same room, they won't be as engaged in the room because they know that this person is going to be very, very rude or very forward with them, and they're not like that, and so they're not going to
Right.
respond in kind, right? And
Right.
so I think it becomes very discouraging to the folks when you allow somebody to be that kind of personality in front of others, and then they don't have the license, nor do they want to have the license to respond to have that discontinue. Like, you've been very disrespectful to me. I'm not going to tolerate it. You need to continue. You need to discontinue this. They don't want to say that, right? But they
Right.
certainly
Right.
would love for the leader to say, "Hey, look, you can't talk to other people like that. You can't
Yeah.
talk to him like that. You can't talk to her like that. You can't be that kind of person because you're actually hurting our work environment." And so,
Right.
so that's I think that's you can't allow folks to be rude. You can't allow folks to your leaders to have double standards when it comes to dealing with staff.
Absolutely. Have you ever had one of those moments in your career where you thought everything was going great? Like, this is awesome. Everybody loves me. I love everybody. We're all one happy family. And then you overhear a conversation or a rumor, and suddenly you're like, oh, okay, I was wrong. Things are not great. Like, oh my God. Have you ever had that situation happen? Besides your trust story
Yeah,
where you
yeah,
found that out a year later.
yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe not maybe not squarely on point, um, but I try to as best I can. I can't say that I'm perfect at it, but I try to as best I can be very thoughtful and mindful when it comes to our staff and how we provide for them salary, benefits, a measure of flexibility in terms of how we handle our days, the time within our days, and all of that good stuff. And so, I the last Friday, right, Good Friday, typically we don't have that day off. That's a work day, but I went ahead and said, you know what, it's a bonus day. Everybody has that day off.
Yeah.
They didn't know it was coming. I just on that Wednesday before, I said, hey, look, we're gonna take Friday off, have a 3-day weekend.
Yeah.
Tried to literally our before I started, our closing hour was 5 o'clock, and I moved it to 4:30. And one of the reasons why I did was some of the government organizations and institutions close at 4:30. But
Yeah.
two, also from an hourly rate perspective, I may not be able to give you the raise that you want, but at least what I can do is increase your hourly rate because you're not working that additional half an hour. So I'm giving you something there. And so I use that as the example. I try to be very thoughtful about how we can make sure we're thinking about our staff and
Sure.
pouring into them as best we can within the limits that we have with our budgets and our rules. And I don't know if you have a collective bargaining agreement, but we have a collective bargaining agreement, so we have a union that dictates certain things. So I say all of that because I think that we have a really good relationship, but like our collective bargaining agreement has not been approved. It was voted down,
Right.
even though I thought we were being very reasonable, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so it made me think then, well, maybe I'm not as reasonable as I thought I was being,
Right.
because it's getting shot down by the majority of staff. And
Right.
so I had to recalibrate and think about it. And again, thinking about budgets and funding sources and revenue sources and all that stuff. But
Yeah.
but it spoke to, well, maybe folks aren't nearly as they're not quite. I mean, money always is an issue with folks, and no matter how
Sure.
much you pay, that's always going to be a sticky issue. It's not an elixir, even though people may think that,
Yeah.
to a healthy work environment. But there is that we're still trying to wrestle with, is what is that nice spot for having people feel like they have a livable wage,
Right.
that they're comfortable, and I thought we were kind of on the right path, and
Yeah.
maybe
Yeah.
not quite there. Yeah,
Getting there.
getting
Yeah.
hopefully.
So before we wrap up, I want to go back to a story you shared during your leadership class about riding around in the trash truck to see a day in the life. And you said it was terrible, it was awful, but it gave you a completely different perspective. And that story stuck with me, and I brought it up to you in Washington, D.C., and you were surprised that I remember. But it really did stick with me. It goes back to when you said, you wouldn't expect anything from anybody that you wouldn't also do. And I've always said, if a manager or a boss that I had was willing to clean the toilets right alongside me, then that's somebody that I'm gonna go the extra mile for. And I
Sure.
think that's true for most employees. And when leaders are willing to step into the day-to-day reality of their team, not just to observe it, but also experience it, something changes. The respect is different. The trust is different. And even the hard conversations, the criticism, the coaching, it hits different because they know that you're coming from their point of view. So it makes me think kind of like the Undercover Boss show. Do you watch that?
Right.
Where,
Yeah.
I don't know, some of the disguises are ridiculous, but I'm like,
Yeah.
they see an employee who has all these things, but also, may have like a sick mom at home that they take care of, and,
That's right.
they have all these things. So it just makes you realize that just because you sit in this chair doesn't mean that the people that work for you aren't busting their butt every day for you.
I 110% agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. How
Absolutely.
important do
Yeah.
you think it is for leaders to intentionally put themselves in their employees' shoes? How do you think that in a real meaningful way, not just as a one-on-one time experience, but as part of their leadership style. How important do you think it is?
Yeah, so maybe I was a little over the top when it came to that trash truck deal, but I really wanted to understand what they were doing and what they were experiencing, and um, it was a way to have a frame of reference when it came, quite frankly, to um, you know the value of the work, and
Right.
when they're talking about needing a new trash truck that costs $250,000.
Right.
I really understand why they need a new trash truck that costs
Right.
$250,000, right? Because I was actually able to be on that trash truck, and so I think the experience is important to the degree that well, a couple of different reasons, but one of them is it allows you to relate, I think, a little bit better to what our staff are trying to convey to you as some of the challenges that they're dealing with, right? And you might be able to intellectually and academically kind of process, what the why of the difficulty, but it's a totally different ballgame when you're actually in the weeds of it and understand kind of the nuanced elements of it. And I had the luxury of in my previous job, we had a gap at one point where our capital fund person, we call it our director of modernization, um, he had retired, and we had a gap or a period of time where there was nobody in that position, and so I was kind of doing some learning on the fly and
Yeah.
working and doing my job, but also helping in that space, and I really got to understand how the mechanics of that operation worked, not the
Yeah.
reports, but the mechanics that went in to ultimately
Right.
those numbers, and and then what I was able to do is that when we ended up promoting somebody into the position, so we had an internal candidate that wanted the position, and he had not done this work specifically, and so when he was promoted into the position, I actually could help him, could actually
Right.
assist him in his growth, his maturation into that position, and so I wouldn't have been able to do it had I not gotten a little bit more dirty and gotten to understand the program better, and then be able to converse with him as he learned and got, quite frankly, more proficient than me. We got to
Yeah.
still be able to talk about the what ifs and the different scenarios and how are we handling this, how are we handling that, and so it's I think from a knowledge standpoint and being educated and being more relatable, if you want to call it that, to your staff. Having a better understanding of the programs more firsthand helps for sure.
Yeah.
It's not the only thing, but it definitely helps. I mean, I don't know how to do a 50058,
Right.
but I know what a 50058 is,
Right. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I've done file reviews and all of that, but. And so by doing the file reviews, now I know what's in a file, right? I'm
Yeah.
the CEO, but I know if I open a file, there are going to be things that I'm going to be looking for because I know what's
Right.
supposed to be in that file. And
It
so
almost
I
makes
think
you it almost makes your job easier in that aspect, like the capital funds thing or whatever. Like when
yeah,
you're working on a budget and you understand the meat and potatoes of what they're dealing with, it almost makes you're just like, oh, okay, well, I know this, and this, so I can make this work. And it's like, huh, my job's so much easier. It's like ChatGPT is all
exactly.
of your people, and you're just making your life easier.
100%, 100%. I had at one time earlier in my career, when I was a COO, I had to do some bank reconciliations for the team because we had some things we had to get done, and so I learned how to do them, and I learned about the finance department a little bit better and how they
Yeah.
handle certain things, and so more recently, our CFO here, uh, we were hiring an accountant, um, and so we're talking and we're meeting with her, and they're all talking and they're using this language, that language, and I just jumped right in and started
Yes.
talking about the things that I knew they were talking about, and they both looked at me and they're like, Where did you learn this stuff?" I said,
Right. Yeah.
I know the language because I've been there, done that, and so it
Yeah.
certainly helps. Again, that it makes you more, I think, relatable. And then when the CFO comes to me and says, hey, we've got this, and this, I understand a little bit at least about why he's saying or she's saying what they're saying. And so I do think that it's important, but it's not the only thing. Some people are not going to be necessarily. I'm not a social service person, so I might not be the best person for the resident relations department, right?
Right,
But,
yeah.
but I know
I
what they
used
do.
to I used to work at an accounting firm, and during tax season, I worked at the front desk, and it was insane. And we always joked with one of the main shareholder, the managing shareholder. We were like, "You need to run the front desk one day," and he was like, "Absolutely not. I know what you guys go through. Do not put me in that spot." And we were just always tease him like, you need to sit here when the phone just rings and rings and rings and there's a line of people and you're trying to, process these tax returns and all that stuff. And he's just
Yeah.
like, do not put me there. Absolutely not.
It's a totally different perspective, and you start to
Yeah.
really appreciate that front desk, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Senghor, thank you so much for sharing your insights today, talking about culture, the hard conversations, the hard lessons, and what it really takes to protect it. And sometimes every leader needs to hear. So I know I walked away with a lot to talk about, and I hope our listeners did too. Culture isn't about policies and procedures, it's about people, the behavior we allow, and the examples we set as leaders. So protecting culture is hard work, but totally worth it. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great conversation. Now you've got me thinking about a lot more things. So
Yeah.
thank you for the time
That's
that you
good.
spent with me.
That's good. Yes. So to our listeners, thank you for joining us. And as always, grab your favorite drink, pull up a chair, and join us the next time on the director's desk, where we have conversations over coffee or whatever's in your cup. Thank you so much. It's like gonna